everybody. How's it going? My name is Andrew. I'm with First Gen Entrepreneurs, and today I have on my strategy session that I host each week with me my buddy Bryan Huhn. Good morning, Bryan. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. So, for those of you who are unacquainted, we've got 121 attendees total. So, hopefully, we'll get some people who show up and get some benefit from this today. But the idea is for first gen entrepreneurs, the people who are the first ones in their family to start a business. The truth is you often don't know what you don't know. And so the purpose of these strategy sessions is I interview a different subject matter expert for each one, pick their brain a little bit and get some advice and actionable tips that you can put to use in your business. So if you don't mind, anybody who's listening in on this, just say hi in the chat. We just got a hello from Jim. Hey, Jim, how you doing, buddy? Hope you're doing well. And let us know where you're dialing in from with this number of attendees. I'd love to know what part of the world you're listening in from. And also, if you have any questions on building wealth, that's the subject that we're talking about today. Go ahead and throw those in there because we'll have some time at the end of the show to talk about that as well. Hey, Mike, how's it going, buddy? Hope you're doing good, man. So Bryan is a financial advisor. However, Oklahoma. Hey, Philip, how's it going, man? Hope the weather's good in Oklahoma. Or are you freezing? Chicago, Louisville. Yeah, we've got some. Yeah, hopefully you guys are staying warm inside your homes or your office or wherever you're at. So Bryan is a financial advisor, but not, frankly, there's a lot of financial advisors on LinkedIn, right? And I respect that. I have one personally myself. I think financial advisors just really offer a tremendous value and service because just like entrepreneurship, most people are not certified experts in investing and finance. And, with just a little bit of advice early on in your career, you can have a tremendous impact at the tail end of your career when it comes to retirement. What I like about Bryan and why I'm having him on the show today is because he really kind of takes a different attitude. It's not just strictly about how much money you can build, but it's about being intentional, slowing down a little bit and enjoying life and letting money serve that purpose and not you just being a slave to money. Is that a fair way to put it, Bryan?
Definitely. Yeah, I view money as a tool, and at the end of the day, we all just want to enjoy our lives and be happy. And I think some people get into the downward spiral sometimes of just chasing after more and more and more instead of being mindful, instead of being intentional about what do you want to accomplish with it. So yeah, I definitely take a little bit different approach there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can testify. I've gotten to know Bryan a little bit personally, just in the last, what would you say? We met probably 6 or 8 months ago on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Just really appreciate your attitude towards all of this. I'm blown away too. We've got friends here from Bali, someone from London. Hey guys, this is awesome. Love getting to talk to you guys and appreciate you saying hi in the chat. And again, if you have questions on wealth, feel free to throw those in there too, because we'll have some time for that afterward. So, Bryan, when you and I were talking about doing this episode, one of the things I asked you is what are some tips that you can offer to other entrepreneurs when it comes to building wealth? And you came up with 5 different things there. So my plan is let's just kind of tackle those one at a time and see what your thoughts are on it. And then we can kind of just go back and forth on that and see if anybody has any questions along the way. Does that work for you?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. So what I've got here in my notes, the first thing that you said was building baseline wealth. So what do you mean by baseline wealth?
Yeah. Well, first, let me just say, everybody, just consider this to be general guidance. Everyone's circumstances are unique. And I think that's especially the case with entrepreneurs. Our scenarios tend to be a little bit more unique than, the typical corporate employee or anyone else out there. But, I can't really give advice or recommendations without having a full understanding of your circumstances, nor would you want to take advice from somebody who doesn't know you and understand what's going on in your life. So
right.
I just wanted to throw that out there first and just kind of consider this general guidance. But Baseline wealth, what I mean like that, or what I mean by that, and I'm coming from the perspective of kind of a new entrepreneur, because this is all new to me. I left my corporate job in 2020, and designed a financial plan to build the foundation of what I believe is going to be a sustainable business. But Andrew, I know you're a more established entrepreneur. You successfully built and sold a business. So, would love to hear some of your perspectives on this as well.
Is that your way of saying old? I'm older and more experienced, right? Yeah.
More experience as an entrepreneur. I think you took the plunge before I did, so maybe you're smarter than I am.
Or crazier. Yeah, depending.
So, anyways, by building baseline wealth, it's kind of, I look at it as almost a safety net, and the idea is you want to minimize stress away from the business, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, and even before I became an entrepreneur, I remember talking to people who were, and you always hear things about, I'm putting out a lot of fires, I'm wearing a lot of different hats, and so there's a lot of things going on with managing a business. And the last thing we need is financial stress on the personal side away from the business. So we want to minimize the stress away from the business. Some may disagree. Actually, a funny story, when I first started in my career right out of college, I worked for a really large broker dealer. And one of the regional managers came into our office and said, here's what you need to do. Go out and buy a house you can't afford, buy a car you can't afford, because that's going to motivate you to sell more annuities, to write more insurance policies, and get your production up. And I
That's
just
an interesting take.
yeah. But maybe that's a little bit more old school, but needless to say, I didn't last too long at that place. But I just totally reject that mentality. I think, at least for me, as an entrepreneur, I want to come from a place of abundance versus scarcity. And I think that's the optimal mindset to building a business. If we're feeling the squeeze, like we have to get this new client or we have to make the sale in order to pay our mortgage this month, then we can sometimes come across as desperate. And I think it's really easy for clients to sense that, and I think that can backfire. So that's what building baseline wealth is all about, is kind of having that financial foundation where you're not stressed out about finances and you can just focus on what you need to focus on to build your business.
So let me ask you real quick, Bryan. Sorry to interrupt you. And I'm curious, to anyone listening in the audience, when we talk about wealth, there's a difference between your net worth, how much you have in assets, but then your income, your ability to cover your expenses and then hopefully exceed your expenses. To you folks who are listening in the comments, which one do you think is more important to you right now? Is it building up your income or is it building up your net worth? I'd be curious if you guys don't mind sharing that in the comments. But Bryan, when you're talking about building baseline wealth, which of those two categories are you referring to?
Well, it's not about income. It's more, it's part of the net worth calculation. It's how much savings or investments that you have set aside.
Okay.
So,
and the reason being that if you've got sufficient savings, you've got enough kind of resources, then what that does is that frees you up mentally when it comes to building your business so that you're not under so much pressure. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Exactly. Yeah. Over the last couple of years, like I said, I left my corporate job in 2020 and, just registered as an investment advisor earlier this year. And I've been able to just slow down. I've got sort of that safety net to know that I'm not stressing about my finances. I can slow down and think. It gives me more time to plan, gives me time to fail, which are great learning experiences when we fail, which allows me to iterate and you feel more empowered to kind of take risks that could lead to some breakthroughs with your business. And so that was my mentality, and for me, a few years ago, when I built my financial plan to start a business, it was about creating kind of a bridge. I wanted to be able to go 2 years of being able to live off the savings that I had set aside, and not make any income.
Gotcha.
So that's what it was for me as an aspiring entrepreneur, was sort of build that bridge to take my time and build the foundation of what I believe is going to be a sustainable business. For somebody that's more established as an entrepreneur, it might look more like having a much more significant chunk of money set aside in a non-retirement investment account. And the goal there would be to have enough set aside where you can cover your basic living expenses with roughly a 5% annual withdrawal. And the reason I say that is because if you look historically at the stock market, like if you look at the S&P 500, throughout its history, the average return on an annual basis is close to 12%. So if you're withdrawing 5% of your portfolio, it's pretty reasonable to expect that if you have a diversified stock market index fund, that you'll probably get, in the ballpark of 8 to 10% returns annualized.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as everybody knows, that fluctuates all over the place. It's not
right.
8 to 10% every year.
Right.
But if you're withdrawing 5% and you're growing by 8 to 10%, you're still continuing to grow your assets and build wealth over time. And so what that does for a more established entrepreneur, especially like if you have an LLC set up where your business assets are totally separate from your personal assets, like your business could go under, you could get sued. Worst case scenario could happen, but then, on the personal side, you're good because you can still cover your basic living expenses. So again, it's really that safety net of knowing that you're going to be okay, and it empowers you. It's really empowering, and it allows you to, I think, focus on the best work. And ultimately, that's what's going to attract clients.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So kind of what I'm saying to summarize this section here is there's 3 phases to this. There's pre-entrepreneurship, right? Before you've made that jump, if you can build up a sufficient nest egg, what that does is it sets you up for success so that you're not under so much pressure when you do make that leap, right?
Yeah.
But then once you've made the leap, then the focus might shift towards income. I've got some comments, one from Mike, worried about income. Here's another one from Will, worried about income. And so at that point, it's like, let's get this business to where it covers my expenses. And now this thing becomes a long-term sustainable thing. But then that third gear, if you will, is building up your net worth and starting to think long-term. That here's a comment where she's talking about building net worth over time so that she can make that jump. So is that kind of fair that you've got these 3 stages to this, do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And just to be clear, when I'm saying building baseline wealth, that's totally separate from the business.
Right.
So
You're talking about your personal wealth as independent from the business.
Exactly. So you're not necessarily withdrawing 5% from that portfolio because you're running a business and you're generating profits, and that's really going to be your primary source of income. You just want to have enough assets saved up away from the business that, if that worst case scenario ever panned out, that you'd be able to cover your basic living expenses with a 5% withdrawal.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good. So hopefully that's helpful. So let's talk about this next one, and this is again where I feel like you really are speaking a little bit different angle or different approach than a lot of the other financial advisors that I talk to. But this idea of your mindset, being mindful, and the intention behind building wealth. So what's your kind of philosophy and tips for entrepreneurs in that realm?
Yeah, so I've seen so many times throughout the years as a financial advisor and just in the investment industry in general, where you see how there are successful people out there that are just kind of winging it. They're going through life, spending money. They don't really know where their money's going. And that's how you end up seeing people who are making $300,000 or $400,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck, which is just crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Like entrepreneurs can't do that. There's a lot on the line. And I think mindfulness and intention in what we're doing every day, but also in the way that we're allocating our resources, which is time and money, is so important. And for me, that begins with reflection and self-awareness. Self-awareness is a big thing I've been talking about with folks lately. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who I think is totally self-aware, but he told me that he's not. Like, he lacks self-awareness, because it's an ongoing journey, right? Like, every day we're learning new things about ourselves, and we need to sort of adjust our plan as we evolve. But if we do reflect and we know what's most important to us, then it helps us to create goals that are aligned with our values, which I think is really important, especially in business. One of the things that drove me crazy in my corporate career and eventually led me to a place of just being burned out was having a comp structure that was constantly at odds with my belief system, right? Like, I used to work for fund companies, and I would go into financial advisors' offices and educate them on different types of investment solutions that they can use with their clients. And so I would usually have like one or two, maybe three funds that I thought were really good and I could get behind and feel good recommending. But then when you're working for a big company, they want to see more of a mix in the products that you're selling. And so there may be something that is not that great, right? And they're like, well, we want you to sell more of that. So, and then they would adjust the compensation structure to incentivize that. And so that's just a terrible situation to be at a point where your goals in terms of your business are at odds with your values. So to me, that's really important. And that's really why the mindfulness part is so important to me.
So I want to just rewind a little bit and talk about this concept that you've met entrepreneurs, like actually had this conversation where they're making $300,000, $400,000 a year, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. That's not just some hyperbole. Like, you actually know people like that, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that I've met entrepreneurs that are doing that, but over my career in the financial services industry, I saw that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I saw people that, were executives at corporations, the highest paid people in their company. And then when it comes time to retire, they only have $1 million or $2 million, which seems like a lot, but for them, it's nothing, right?
Right. Like, and had they been intentional and mindful about how not letting their lifestyle creep on them,
Exactly.
and then they would be in a totally different position, right? When it comes time for retirement. I can speak to this. So, to your point about me having started a business in 2006 and sold it in 2021, there were periods during that journey for me that I made more money than I ever thought possible back in 2006, right? Um, and frankly, I let my lifestyle creep just ran with me. There were a couple of years there where it's tax season. You look back and realize how much you made last year and then go, where did it go? I
Yeah.
have nothing to show for it. And I think that that's the danger right there if you're not mindful and intentional with your money.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes, an extreme scenario to really make you realize that. And that's what happened with me. Like, I used to be that way, always trying to keep up with my peers, and spending on things that really didn't matter to me. But then I quit my job. I had a health scare as well, which I know you and I have talked about.
Mhm.
And I'm in the process of starting my business. So obviously money is pretty tight, but like, if I look back over the last couple of years from a financial standpoint, they were the worst years of my career. But from a personal development and just happiness standpoint, it's never been better. It's been the best period of my life. And that's where I started realizing that to be really happy and to wake up every morning and pursue things that I want to pursue and feel like I'm making an impact doesn't cost a whole lot of money. And when you come to that realization, it becomes very easy to be mindful and only allocate your money to the things that are most important. And to me, that's just been a huge game changer.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, if someone at some point needs some advice on this, this is where you can really help them. Is helping understand where they're coming from, what is important to them personally, and how you can get money to work for you to help you achieve those goals, not the other way around. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so
Um,
important to, like I said before, to make sure that everything, your entire financial plan is really aligned with your values. And sometimes we think we know what our values are, but we don't. We have to really dig deeper and
right.
peel layers back to figure out what it is we really want. And that's what I try to do, is to help people, not tell people what they should value, but help them actually realize what it is that they value.
Exactly. Right. Because no two people are going to be the same, but that's a process to go through that. Philip makes a really great point here. The Joneses are non-existent when you're in hot water, right? So keeping up with the Joneses is the very thing that can get you in hot water. And yet, once you find yourself in that position, that all goes out the window. You just now have a financial problem to deal with. So great point, Philip. Thank you for sharing that. So, Bryan, let's go on to our third one here. I think this is something we could talk about all day, probably. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time and try to keep this to about 30 minutes or so.
Okay.
But one of the things that you mentioned is simplifying your investments. So as an entrepreneur, what does that mean, simplifying your investments?
Yeah, so kind of along the same lines of what I was talking about with that level of baseline wealth, where it eliminates stress away from the business, or at least minimizes stress away from the business. That's kind of the same concept here with investments, right? Like, for example, I used to own a condo and I rented that out. And we hear all the time about how real estate is passive income, which it was, but and I had a property management company that was managing everything for me, so I didn't really have to do anything. But I'll tell you one thing: when I got a call from the property management company saying the furnace blew out and you need a new one, or we're having a tough time getting a new tenant in there, you're going to miss out on a month or two of rent, like, that stressed me out,
Hmm.
right? And that's not an example of simplifying your investments. And to me, as an entrepreneur, I don't want to have any stresses or worries about my investments. I want to be able to, again, be in that mindset where I can be, uh, you know, optimizing my performance with my business. Now, for stock investing, which is what I advocate for, um, complexity rarely creates an advantage.
Mm,
There's been study after study that shows that the majority of professional money managers can't even beat their benchmark.
gotcha.
And uh, just do a Google search of how many money managers beat their benchmark, and you'll see these studies. But the last one I saw, over 90% of them failed to do it over a 10-year span. And let's say you're lucky enough to get one of those money managers that did beat the benchmark over a 10-year span. What are the odds that they're going to do it again over the next 10 years and keep that same management team that was successful in place to continue doing it? Odds are very, very slim of that happening. So my point is that if professional money managers who spend the majority of their waking hours trying to beat the market through
Hmm.
whatever complex strategies and proprietary processes that they have in place, if they can't do it, why should we try to do it? And so I just simplify, uh, owning index funds primarily. Morgan Housel, I don't know if you guys may be familiar. He wrote a book, The Psychology of Money. But I remember him saying one time that the only things he owns are his house, his only assets are his house, his bank account, and his index fund.
Mm, it's
And
pretty
so that,
simple.
for me as an entrepreneur, that's what I want. It's simple. I know it's going to grow over time. I'm going to build wealth, and then I can focus my time and energy on the primary driver of my wealth, which is going to be my business.
Yeah, and I can testify to that. I owned the commercial building that my business operated out of. And when that business was still Operating out of it, it made sense as an owner operator essentially of that building, right? And I had tenants as well that I rented out to, but I was already there 40 hours a week or more. And so property management wasn't that big a deal when you're already there. After I sold the business, however, and I've kind of my interests have shifted and I'm not there every day, I've come to find out property management is like it's a lot of work. You know, it
Yeah.
people talk about it being passive. It's really not passive. That's an active investment. And at the end of the day, in my particular circumstances, I didn't wind up any better off financially versus the returns I could have gotten on index funds, except I would have not had any of the work to do on that
Yeah,
side of things.
exactly. Funny
So
how that works out.
your mileage may vary, but I'm telling you, if you think you can buy real estate and have tenants and it be passive, you're in for a rough time.
And
Um,
and real estate is just an example. Like
yeah,
actively trading a portfolio would be another example of putting more work and more complexity into your investment portfolio than you need to.
right.
Again,
And you're
that rarely really provides an advantage.
yeah, and nobody can beat the stock market. I mean, you're just not you're not going to outperform the average. And if you do, it's only temporary and you're just as much at risk of losing it all.
And if they do, there are some money managers out there that are fantastic, right? And they may deliver great returns and beat the stock market over a period of time. But again, like what are the odds that they're going to be able to do that again and do it consistently
Right.
over multiple market cycles, over multiple economic cycles?
Right.
It just becomes more and more rare. And if you do find somebody who can do that consistently, odds are they're not going to manage your money, because the bigger they get, then they lose their advantage. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I think beating the market and having very, very clever investment strategies. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's a lot more. Yeah.
If it's too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Yeah.
So just keep it simple, get your baseline where it needs to be, get your money to where it's making money, but keep it simple and focus on building your business, and you're going to be better off for it than thinking there's some magic trick. All right, so I'm going to let you pick because we're running out of time. I apologize, I've not kept pace here. We've got two other things to talk about. If you had to pick one, do you want to talk about investment philosophy or maintaining
Yeah,
discipline?
I'll just run through real quick because this sort of builds off what we were already talking about. So my investment philosophy is it begins with the fact that we don't know what's going to happen in the short term, and nobody does. We just talked about how professional money managers have a tough time with this. So what I do is I just invest in the global economy. And the way I look at it is an individual company can go out of business, they can go bankrupt, and their stock can go all the way to zero.
Mhm.
But the entire global economy probably isn't going out of business. And if it
And if it
does,
does, we got bigger problems.
we got bigger problems, right? Who cares about our investments at that point? So there's an index fund that I use, Vanguard Total World Stock Market Index, which the symbol is VT. And it's a pretty good representation of the global economy, and it's going to adapt over time as the economy changes. So to me, like, I know there's a lot of financial advisors and a lot of people in the investment industry that say like a 100% stock portfolio is really risky and dangerous.
Mhm.
But to me, if you're investing in something that represents the entire global economy, that's a really safe investment. Like, it's going to be volatile because stocks are volatile, and that's why you get great long-term returns. And we're going to go through recessions. We know that those are inevitable, but you just have to plan for those. And what I do for that is just make sure that I have sufficient liquidity set aside so that if I ever do
Right.
have to dip into my investment portfolio during a bear market when the thing is down 20% or more, I'm not selling at that time, at a
Right.
bad time, because that'll kill my long-term returns. So just own the global economy and then just have sufficient liquidity so you're not forced to sell at a bad time. And to me, that's just the approach I take. It's simple, it works, and again, allows me to focus on the things that I need to focus on.
Yeah, and that's interesting. There's a distinction you made between uh, how did you put it? Volatility is not the same thing as safety, right? Like something can
Right.
be a safe investment while being volatile. It's just a question of how much time are you willing to let this ride out to, see the highs and the lows. But if you've put all your eggs in one volatile basket and you don't have any money set aside for emergency purposes, then you might find yourself needing to take that money out at a moment when it's at a low. And now you're going to pay the price for it. Whereas if you've got that liquidity, you've got the ability to take off of those reserves without touching this, then you control the timing of when you actually want to sell and can weather
Exactly.
that volatility. Yeah,
And
great point.
so, yeah, so like a lot of the traditional advice in the industry, particularly for like somebody who's retired and living off their assets, has been like the 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks and then 40% in bonds because that's safer. Well, I look at it like, why would I want to sacrifice my long-term returns by having 40% of bonds in the portfolio? If I have a global stock market index fund and then I have at least, 18 months or 2 years of cash set aside, so I'm not forced to sell when things are bad, that's a much better way to go. And so that's what I do. And then personally, I look for more growth opportunities. So I build around my core portfolio, which is that global stock market index fund, by using different types of emerging trends. Things like clean energy, biotech, cybersecurity, fintech, things that I think are going to pan out over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's where I look to get my longer term growth versus trying to time the market.
Gotcha. Here's a question. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but Shailendra, hopefully I got that right. Asking if you have any other outside of stocks, are there any types of investments that you like or recommend or have ideas on?
Well, there's a lot of different investments. For me personally, I just invest in my stock portfolio. I don't think that there's any need to get any more complicated than that. But that's just me personally. Other
Right.
people are going to have different opinions and want to invest in other things, but I just don't think it's necessary. And I think for me, trying to get a little too complicated on that side again is going to take my focus away from what I need to be focusing on.
Gotcha. Yeah. So thank you for that input, and Shalendra, thank you for the question there. And I agree with that. I think that there's lots of different types of investments you can make. Personally, one of the biggest investments I ever made was in my business. Right,
Yeah.
like I put all my eggs in that basket for a very long time. Now, it happened to pay off for me when I sold the business in the end, but it could have just as easily gone the other way and not been worth anything. So, I think with any other type of investment that you look at, there's the higher the risk, the higher the reward. But so long as you go into it knowing that you could lose whatever you put in there, you just got to be careful about it. Whereas the stocks, you've got this history and you can look at the averages over the last 100 years or whatever it is and realize that so long as you've got enough liquidity that you don't have to sell when things are low and you can ride it out, then it's pretty simple. It's a pretty
Well, and
simple approach.
and there's a lot of different things to invest in, and it comes down to managing risks in a portfolio. So like I said, the majority of my portfolio is that global stock market index fund. That's going to be about 70%, and then the other 30% are in these different types of emerging themes like I mentioned earlier. And so for example, if somebody wanted to invest in Bitcoin, they could
Mhm.
use that strategy that I use, but they would just swap out one of my stock ETFs with Bitcoin, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can include in your investment portfolio. The important part is having a cohesive strategy where you're not going to destroy your long-term returns by going all in on something.
Yeah, all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
All right, so wrapping up here, the last thing that you wanted to mention was maintaining discipline. So why is that so important for first gen entrepreneurs?
Well, I think discipline is just an important thing. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people out there that talk about creating habits and being disciplined, and the benefits of compounding returns. And really, that's what I think it is. Is if you're disciplined and you have a process that you stick to, um, the benefits and the progress that you make are just going to compound over time. And that's why, for me as a financial advisor, one of the biggest benefits I think is being that accountability partner for somebody. It's like if you get a gym membership, like, are you going to have the discipline to make sure you're getting into the gym, 3 or 4 times a week or whatever it is on your own? Or do you need a personal trainer to help keep you disciplined?
Right.
Because again, if you're disciplined, you're going to experience the benefits of compounding returns. So really nothing more to add on that. I mean, I think everybody understands that being disciplined is a good thing. What would you add, Andrew?
What I would add to that is there. I've been actually posting about this a fair bit lately. The amount of content out there on social media that promotes this idea that you can have an overnight success in a business, or this one hack, or this one simple trick, and you can make a ton of money, and look at this lifestyle that I've afforded myself because of these hacks. All of that is just garbage. you know, just focus on the basics. Get to where you have a viable business, a real product or service that's being offered that provides real value to real people, and repeat that process and slowly build that wealth. I hate to break it to people who want a quick fix. There's no such thing. It's just like going to the gym. Like you said, you can't just show up and do some miracle workout and be ripped in a week. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Um, but if you can just zoom out, be patient, be consistent, maintain that discipline, whether it's building a business or investing in stocks or any other investment, that's the key to really kind of building this over time.
Yeah. And like we talked about at the beginning of the call with mindfulness and intention is setting goals that are meaningful to you. Like for me, that's been a game changer. Setting,
Right.
figuring out what I want to accomplish, not what is the expectation that somebody else has about me, or
Right.
what kind of external validation do I want to chase? No, what is the life I want to live? And then staying disciplined, um, in my process to getting there.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
awesome.
getting rid of the comparison game and getting rid of FOMO is huge.
Yeah, because you'll unintentionally just sink yourself when you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous. I love that expression, that people buy things they don't need with money they don't have to impress people they don't like.
yeah,
And it's like, yeah, I think we're all guilty of it at one time or another. Just don't let that become your habit, your lifestyle, and do what's important for you. Establish that first, and then start working towards that goal, and it'll make a huge difference in the long run. So,
mhm.
Bryan, thank you so much, man. We appreciate everybody who showed up today. The comments, this is awesome. Getting to chat with you folks. Appreciate your contributions into this. Bryan, if someone is curious about continuing this conversation or learning more on this subject, what should they do?
Yeah, you can go to my website, which is reflectivewealth.com. And I actually recently created a free community, so that the membership to that community is free. That includes a weekly newsletter where I give my thoughts on the stock market and the economy. I'm starting to do classes, interactive sessions to teach my strategies and answer any questions in real time, as well as unlimited email access. So you can email me anytime if you have questions about your investments or financial situation. The way I run my business really is I help people, and then I have additional services for those who want or need it. So like I never try to push anything or push services that people don't need. So that would be the place to start, is just join that community. And I think you'll find a lot of helpful information there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I can testify, Bryan, folks, you can probably tell just by attending this. Nice dude. So thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on the show today. Hopefully the folks who tied in got something of value from it. I got a few comments saying as much. So it's great meeting you guys. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me if you haven't already. Same for Bryan. If there's anything either one of us can do for you, I'm sure both of us would be happy to help. So thanks, folks. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. See ya.